Very Special Boy Seeks Very Special Girl for the Magical Time by Lady Miller. First version written in Reykjavik, Iceland, October 2008. Final version completed in Barking, Essexshire, August 2010 and June 2015. Copyright by Lady Miller. Once upon a time, there was a very special boy who was looking for a very special girl. People told the very special boy that very special girls didn't exist and that he was wasting his time in his quest. They said that no one was very special in the shires where they lived, and who did he think for thinking otherwise? The only people that existed, they said, were normal people, but the very special boy didn't believe them because he knew that there were no normal people in the shires. They were all special, but they just didn't know it. And what made him very special was that he knew it, and he knew that there was a very special girl too, somewhere out there, and he just had to find her. The shires were not a place for the very special boy to exist in, and they weighed heavy on his heart. He didn't understand why the people of the shires didn't know that they were also very special, and he didn't know why they were so content to spend their lives in the workhouses and the alehouses and in the noise and in the streets. The very special boy couldn't be there anymore. He needed to escape to a place of beauty where his heart could roam free, and to a place where he thought he maybe have to find the very special girl who would make him feel complete. One day, after the very special boy had watched the sunset and the stars rise over the horizon of the shires, he fell into the deepest of sleep. In his sleep he dreamt a dream about a very special land, a place where magic still existed and where all the people were very special because they all lived from their hearts. It was an ancient place, a sacred land, far to the west of the shires, where the land ended and the sea began. It was a place of legend and of wonder, of myths and of wisdom, a place of mists and moors, of furious white water and of the darkest rocky shores. It was a place that was alive. It was a magical land that beckoned him and all with the purest of hearts. It was the land of the setting sun, and it's where he would find the very special girl. When the very special boy woke, the very special boy's heart told him that his dream was not a dream at all, and all he had to do was know it. So he trusted his heart and packed all of his worldly belongings into his sack and said goodbye to the shires in which he had grown up. He knew where he was going, and he knew how to get there, and he knew that once he got there, he'd know it. And he knew that he would find the very special girl. So he began his journey towards the setting sun. He walked through the meadows and by the hedgerows, over the hills and along the valleys. He walked through the fields of barley and past rings made of stone. He crossed the creeks and the streams and walked through the forests and the woods until at last he reached the river which marked the frontier of the shires to the land of the setting sun. He knew he was there, and as he looked upon the river, he saw a row of slippery stepping stones which would take him across into the enchanted land. But not only were they slippery, they looked so very far apart. Only a giant could possibly cross into the land of the mystical sun. But then he remembered his dream and the lesson it had taught him. He must know that he can get into the magical land. He couldn't doubt it, and hoping or believing were not enough. So he stood before the very first stepping stone, which looked a great leap away, and he closed his eyes. He started to remember how much he knew, and the more he remembered, the more he knew, until at last he finally felt he knew enough to take his first step across the river and into the magical land. As he stepped forward, the wind began to blow, and it lifted him just as if he was a feather, and he skipped across the stepping stones and into the magical land. The very special boy arrived in the sunshine and in the silence and in the nature and in the peace, and he began his search straight away. He searched all over the magical land for the very special girl. He looked high and he looked low, and he looked left and he looked right, and then he looked up and down. Sometimes he looked around and around and around, but that would just make him dizzy and he would fall over. And all the time he kept the hope alive that he would find the thing for which he was looking, the most precious thing in the world, the very special girl. But it began to look hopeless, and as the very special boy neared the end of his journey, he found himself at the top of a very high moor. The very special boy felt ready to give up. He started to believe that he would never find the thing for which he was looking, and he sank to his knees as tears filled in his eyes. the very special boy thought that this was the lowest point he had ever come to, and that he had never felt so sad. And just as a tear was about to fall from his eyelash, the very special boy saw a great mountain in the distance. It was the highest mountain he had ever seen. It was a mountain with 3 tops, and he knew that it was a very special place indeed. He was compelled to climb it. So he set off across the moors, through the grasslands and through the bogs, and he didn't stop until he reached the base of the mountain. As he looked up, he thought that this must be the highest place in all of the magical land, and if he reached the top, then he would surely see the whole world from up there. So he climbed and he slipped, and he climbed and he slipped, until eventually he reached the very top of the mountain. And when he looked, he could see the whole world from up there. He saw all of the magical kingdom and all of the shires in which he had spent his life. He saw the path he had come from and the whole journey that he had taken to get there. And he saw how beautiful the world was and how wonderful everything was in it. Then suddenly he felt lighter than air, and for the first time in his life, the very special boy felt complete, and he didn't feel he had to search for anything ever again. He hadn't found the very special goal he was looking for, but he had found a very special place, a place that could always be in his heart, and he was very happy that he had done so. He didn't feel that he had failed, and he didn't feel that he had succeeded. He felt that he'd failed and that he succeeded, and that it didn't really matter how he failed or how he had succeeded, because that was all part of the journey anyway. He felt at one and thought that maybe it was a very special place that he was searching for all along, and that perhaps he was never meant to find a special girl after all. He thought that if that was so, then so be it, because he now saw how very special all of the world was, and he felt very special to be a part of it. With that, the very special boy decided to head back towards the frontier of the magical kingdom. He was ready to enter the shires again, and he knew that if he was very careful, he could take the very special place with him and live a very special life wherever he may be. So he left the very special place, and he took the very special place with him, and he carried the very special place in his heart, setting off down the mountain towards the magical river and the only home he had ever known. He jumped and he tripped and he jumped and he tripped until he reached the bottom of the great mountain with 3 tops. Then he followed his path back across the moors and through the grasslands and over the tops, over the bogs, and all the way back to the river at the point where the stepping stones began. As the very special boy stood by the river's edge, he looked upon the stepping stones before him. Before he left the magical kingdom and went back into the shires, he promised that he would always carry the very special place within his heart forevermore, and no matter what happened, he would always lead a life that was magical. And so he went to take his first step out of the magical kingdom and onto the stepping stones that led back to the shires. He found his feet were stuck to the ground. He couldn't move them. He pulled and he heaved and he tugged and he struggled, but nothing would move his feet from their spot. Just as a very special boy began to think that he would be stuck in the same spot forever, he happened to see a very beautiful girl looking at him from the edge of the magical river. She looked like the most beautiful girl he had ever seen in all of his life, and when their eyes met, nothing existed in the world but her. The entire world lit up around them in the brightest of colours, and the very special boy's feet immediately became free. He walked towards the most beautiful girl, and she held her hand out to him. And as his hand touched hers, the very special boy knew that this was the very special girl he had been looking for. And right in that moment, he knew that he was already home, and the feeling he felt was magic. The end, or just the beginning. It's your choice.